Okay, so we're making the arms here, and it's kind of an interesting setup, so I figured I would show it. What I've done is I've made this bushing that fits in my clearance hole above my linear bearing, and what that allowed me to do was center up the Thompson rail in the center of my adjustment range, and then I locked down this linear bearing. Then I measured between the column and the side of the Thompson rail and calculated out that my center to center distance is exactly 8.856 inches. So now I can make these arms. And it's kind of an interesting setup because what I did is I mounted my rotary table on my mill and centered it up under the spindle. And I have a video on how to do that, so check it out if you don't know how to do it. And then I centered up my workpiece on a center punch mark with the pointer. Okay, so now I know that I can, make this hole and cut this radius because it's centered on my mill table. And then what I did is I moved in the X direction 56 inches, and then I rotated the table until it lined up on the center line. So now I know my center to center distance is, as accurate as I can get it with my DRO. And I'm in line, so 0 degrees on my rotary table is in line with the axis of cutting. And what I can do is I can now cut this hole, move it back over, cut this hole, step it out, cut this radius. I'll have to do the clamp dance, and then move down, put a reference hole down here. Keep these Siamese together. I have these can't twist clamps on here, so these are Siamese together, and I won't take these apart until they're done. But then what I can do is then center up on my reference hole on the rotary table and cut this hole in this axis, and then I can also offset the rotate the table and cut these angles. So that's the setup. It's kind of an interesting one. I thought you'd be interested to see that. I'll come back when I start actually cutting. Well, there's pretty much a few hours worth of work. They're still Siamese together. I put in some bolts here, screws actually, and I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but I have a scribed parting line here where I got to cut these things, and the bolts cross the parting line. So right now this is the pretty much exact diameter of my column, and by the way, I've already checked the distance here on the column with the rod and the bearing, so it's perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this here and here, and I'm going to put a slot in over here, and that way I can have a clamp bolt here, and this will allow me to clamp it to the column. So there you go. Work my ass off to make these things, and now I'm going to saw them apart. Keep going here. Well, I've been tweaking this thing. Got it installed. My arms came out good. You can see the pinch bolts over here, same thing. They're pretty solid. I'm pretty happy. I thought they'd need to be thicker, but they clamp on there pretty good. There's the bearing. I don't think I'm going to trim that rod. I think I'm going to just leave it the way it is because it's not in the way. Okay, I've been banging on this thing for a while here, and I got it pretty well lined up good. So what I did is I put my dial indicator on the quill. It's the only vertical reference I have on this thing that is, you know, what I want to measure. So I've only really got a range of about 5 or 6 inches, you know, because this is down all the way. And but I figure, you know, for what it is, it's probably, you know, if it shows accuracy over this range, it's going to be accurate, as good as it's going to get. So this thing is locked down right now, tight. You have to do this. This influences it, and I got it zeroed out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to lower it down 6 inches. I'm going to tighten it back up. So here we go. I'm going to unlock it now. And move the lid a couple thou. Okay. So let me lower it. You can see it's moving around. You know, that's undoubtedly flexing the rod. So I've lowered it like 5 inches, okay? Let me tighten it back up. So it's off a thou, it looks like. You know, that's not too bad for just banging it with a hammer for 5 minutes. It's pretty repeatable. I've done it a couple times. So, you know, I think this is going to work out pretty good. You know, I'm really quite positive I can get it down to less than 1,000th. Because, like I said, I've only been banging on this thing for 5 minutes. I installed the arms. Installed the rod, I lined it up, and you know, I mean, nothing was measured, it was all eyeballed. I ran it up and down the first couple times. It was like, you know, moving 10, 15,000, something like that. And I started tapping the arms, you know, because I know the rod, the Thompson rail, is parallel to the column. That's set because I Siamese both those, both the arms together, so they have exactly the same center to center distance. So that part of it is fixed. Basically what I'm doing is I'm playing with the rotation of the two arms relative to each other. What I've done is I put my little spacer, zoom this out a little, put my little spacer in my clearance hole, slid the rod through so it was centered up where the bearing should be, slid it through the two arms, tightened up the two arms, not a lot, but enough to hold them where they needed to be. And that pretty much lined up the rod because the bores in the arms are vertical. So, you know, they pull the rod into they pull the arms into alignment when I tighten the rod up on the clamps onto the rod. But like I said, you know, that initial setting, it was like 15 degrees off from you know, over the 6 inches, 15 thousandths off. And, you know, basically I just took my bopper here and just started tapping these arms. You know, I fixed the top one. I said, okay, you know, the bottom one is going to move back and forth. And I tapped it, you know, and did the thing with the dial indicator, you know, moving it halfway every time and all that. And, you know, within 5 minutes, I got it like you see it here, within a thou. So I think, you know, another, you know, few minutes here banging it back and forth, and this thing is going to be a winner. Now, you know, you can feel the rigidity here. I mean, you know, this rod's an inch thick and it's hardened. But you know, if I'm pushing on this thing, I can move it back and forth a couple thou. There is some play in it. And you know, I am in the middle of the rod right now too. If I jack this way up or way down, I'm closer to the arm, so you know, actually no, this is bottomed out right here. So when it's bottomed out, it's in the middle of the rod. You know, when I jack it up, it's going to get closer to the top arm, which should, you know, make it a little more rigid. But you know, I mean, I'm putting, you know, some good force on this thing, pushing it, pulling it. You know, I can move it back and forth a thou. So, you know, the whole idea of it is that this is just a guide to keep the head in alignment, and it doesn't take any machining forces. You know, once you get the head where you want it to be, you just tighten it back up, and then it's back to putting the force into the column here. So, yeah, I'm happy with what happened here. You know, it was a little bit of effort, you know, a little bit of logistics, but turned out good. So, another one in the books. Thanks for watching.